when my son was 1 year old. So this is my second child. So this one, he's almost 9 years old now. So when he was one, we actually took him to a wellness checkup, and he actually received 11 vaccines with 4 pokes at that time. And me not really knowing fully, the schedule, I just kind of was going along like we do, that we take our kids to the wellness checkup and we just do what we're supposed to do. Right. And so he, little did I know, kind of looking back now when I saw his vaccine record, they actually gave him a 5-in-1 vaccine that day that was not on the schedule. It was just obviously way too much for his body, and he couldn't handle it. We came home, he had a nap, got up, and then I fed him and he threw up. And I thought, okay, didn't think much of it that day, but then that continued. So he actually threw up basically the same time of day at supper time. So he'd eat supper and he'd throw up. He actually continued to do that for 30 days.
Greetings, hello, good day, wherever you are in this beautiful, wondrous world. Thank you for joining Truehope, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. My name is Simon and I am your host. We at Truehope are a mind and body based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. For more information about us, you can visit truehopecanada.com. We're on the usual social media sites, and if you're new to the podcast, please consider subscribing so you don't miss out on the future episodes. During this series of episodes, we are diving into some testimonials from clients who have used our products and experienced life-changing events. Today, we have got the honor of talking with Michelle Spray. Now, Michelle is a registered holistic nutritionist and works out of Inner Strength Family Chiropractic and Wellness in Saskatoon. Michelle's got an incredible story that she's going to share that primarily involves her son and herself, and I'm really excited to get into it because the remarkable recovery stories I hear on a frequent basis working with Truehope just always blows my mind, because through such incredible impediment and obstacle, the human nature is able to literally perform miracles. I've been working with Truehope for over 3 years now, and I've heard miraculous story after miraculous story, and it is pure and simple micronutrient supplementation that is able to do these impossible things. Michelle, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm doing well, Simon. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. That's great to have you with us. Let's just get straight into a little bit of your backstory. So why don't you let us know about your nutrition practice and the clinic space that you work at?
Yeah. So, I've always been really passionate about nutrition, all throughout my life. Even, as a kid, I was always very interested in nutrition, how it affected the body, and, just having some of my own, body issues or things like that. And, I eventually, went on to university, and I ended up actually going into the College of Education, because when I looked at going into the dietitian college, they kind of dissuaded me a little bit, said there was not a lot of jobs. And back then I didn't know about being an entrepreneur like I am today. So, just being a kid, not really knowing yet. So I went on, kind of followed in my parents' footsteps, became a high school chemistry and math teacher. So I kind of went that direction first. I'll kind of fast forward. My husband and I used to farm organic grain and cattle. And so eventually we sold out of the farm and we moved towards Saskatoon to be close to my parents for support. And then I ran a health and wellness, online health and wellness business from home. Eventually it allowed me to go back to school to do what I was really passionate about, which is nutrition. So I went to CSNN, which is based out of BC. And I really, really enjoyed it. I was able to do it from home while I had my kids and I was running my business at the same time. And then I also hired a personal mentor who was also a holistic nutritionist for a very long time, a lot of years. She actually helped build that college. And so she really helped me on my journey. So I was able to start my nutrition business right away with her being my mentor. So that was back kind of end of 2017, beginning of 2018. So I had clients kind of all across Canada from home. So I would, talk to them over the phone or over Zoom or things like that. And then kind of fast forward when I met my now business partner, Dr. Chantal Goring, in 2018, we just really hit it off right away and we were joined at the hip and we just knew it was really a calling. I never thought I would work outside of the home again. But for me, it was just a calling. I knew that we needed to work together because we were just so much more powerful together. So in November of 2018, I joined with her at Inner Strength Family Chiropractic and Wellness. And so, yeah, ever since then, we've been working with all of our patients together simultaneously. So we do kind of a wraparound holistic approach.
That's really cool. And I'm a little bit familiar with your story, and I know the chiropractic side of things is very, very relevant, which we'll certainly get into. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your family?
Yeah, so I have 4 children. They're so 2 boys and 2 girls. My oldest is 12, and then I have an 8-year-old will be 9 actually in about a week. And I have a 7-year-old and now a 5-month-old. And then my husband, Shane. Yeah.
That's great. Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. So let's get into your story, because your story involves yourself, obviously involves your family, but I think primarily it involves yourself and it involves your son.
Yeah.
And so let's get into things when it started to go a little bit kind of like sideways, when you began this journey. And I believe that your son was having some gastrointestinal issues.
Yes.
And he was 1 at the time?
Yeah. So
okay. Yeah, please. So yeah, let's kind of start this journey with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So when my son was 1 year old, so this is my second child. So this one, he's almost 9 years old now. So when he was 1, we actually took him to a wellness checkup, and he actually received 11 vaccines with 4 pokes at that time. And me not really knowing fully, the schedule, I just kind of was going along like we do, that we take our kids to the wellness checkup and we just do what we're supposed to do. Right. And so he, little did I know, kind of looking back now when I saw his vaccine record, they actually gave him a 5-in-1 vaccine that day that was not on the schedule. So we had 5 more vaccines that day than he was supposed to have.
So he's 1 year old. He goes for this standard wellness checkup. And is it normal to get 11 doses in what you say 4 jabs?
In 4 jabs, yeah.
Is that normal?
So, I mean, I think it's becoming more normal because they're just incorporating more and more vaccines into the schedule. But at that time, no, that was not normal. That wasn't even the actual schedule. So it was just obviously way too much for his body, and he couldn't handle it. We came home, he had a nap, got up, and then I fed him and he threw up. And I thought, okay, didn't think much of it that day, but then that continued. So he actually threw up basically the same time of day at supper time. So he'd eat supper and he'd throw up. He actually continued to do that for 30 days. I had been in contact with the health nurse office. I asked them, I said, what's going on? My son's throwing up every day. Otherwise, he has no symptoms. He seems totally fine. And, is this connected to the vaccines, or is this, a reaction? And they said, no, absolutely 0% chance. So they kind of just shut the door instead of saying, here, maybe we should figure out what's going on, right? And
just to get clear, so before you went into the clinic, he wasn't vomiting.
No, he was totally healthy.
Okay.
Yeah, he was a very early developer. So he walked early. He was talking. He was just amazing. Both my middle children were very early developers. Yeah.
Okay. So, and then you go to the clinic, you get these jabs, and then obviously, you're his mother, so you've been with him like every day, a significant amount of time. So you're going to recognize any psychological, any behavioral, any physiological things that come up. Yeah. So, okay, so 30 days, this persists, you call up, and it's kind of strange that they would say there's absolutely no way that this is connected to these things that happen. So what happens from that?
Yeah, so continuing on from there, he actually continued to throw up about 3 to 4 times a week on average for about 3 years.
Wow.
3 years,
From 1 to 4.
Yeah.
3 to 4 or 5 times a week. Yeah. Someone's throwing up at the same kind of time of the day. Was it like after eating?
So always in the night. So he started throwing up in the night about 2 a.m. I tried lots of different things. I would, he couldn't eat for certain periods of time before bed. I tried, eliminating different types of foods. Definitely developed major texture issues. Couldn't eat a lot of vegetables, any sort of texture. Sometimes he would even get it down and throw it up. So he would actually throw up other times just from texture issues, but just the throwing up for, not in conjunction with a specific food would be in the middle of the night. And I had talked to doctors, I talked to the, the health nurses, and I would always tell them that this happened, right after the vaccine. And so they kind of just put their hand up in my face and kind of shut the door. And I feel like, looking back, what would have been better for them to do is to say, maybe they would have still said, this has nothing to do with the vaccines, but here, let's help you. Let's figure out what's going on with your son. But they didn't.
Yeah, because I think it's okay for them to say, no, it's not connected, but they offering another solution or to investigate and do some other diagnostics. You're the patient, you're the patient's mother, and you've obviously, you're experiencing some wild things at home with your son.
Yeah.
Must have the anxiety and stress levels are just, I have a 1.5-year-old, and just you never stop thinking about their health and well-being, right? So yeah, like it's kind of wild that they would just like completely shut the door and not like investigate further. So like, where's your head at with this? Are you investigating things? Are you looking things up?
Yeah. So at the time, I just started to kind of look into things and research, and still it took me a while to really fully dig further into vaccines as well, because I did want to believe them. Even though it was so apparent to me, it was so in my face that it literally happened that same day. And before that, he was eating, spaghetti and meat sauce and vegetables, and he had such a varied diet. And then he went to only being able to eat like very few foods. And, so it was just so dramatic to me. And then it continued to get worse, as his symptoms got worse, and I started looking more into things. And he wasn't able to feel hot, cold, or pain well. His speech just wasn't developing as it should. He would kind of start to talk properly, and then it would just come out like garbage out of his mouth. He couldn't form friendships or relationships. He was just basically running all over the place. We couldn't even go, we couldn't go downtown or go to the forestry farm or things like that, because he would just run away.
How was it with your other kids and at home? What was it like at home?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of guilt kind of looking back at that, because I feel really bad that I was always having to keep everything really calm all the time, because any sort of overstimulation, he would just be all over the place, and you would kind of see his eyes just, kind of go blank a little bit. And he would just not be able to control himself. So if we kept everything really, really calm, then it would keep him calm. And so I kind of forced them to do that instead of just being able to be kids.
Yeah, that's really tricky for home life, right? And the way that children obviously naturally develop, and you had children already, right? So you know that progression. I'm just significantly convinced that a parent, especially a mother, knows when something is wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because this has to be the most stressful anxiety. I'm just like shaking inside just thinking about this. But so where does this lead into you and your physical manifestations of illness? Like, where does this come in for you?
And for my own health.
For your own health, yeah.
Yeah. So for sure, back then, I mean, my anxiety, just continued to grow. I was gaining weight. I had been running businesses from home, and eventually I started to, not be able to do simple things like call people, follow up, or right. Everything became just very like anxiety ridden for me, just kind of everyday life, and even just going anywhere and going places with my kids. And I just kind of started to shut down about it all. Yeah. I mean, experiencing that for 3-4 years, especially the first initial stages of like concern and worry, and like you just have no idea what's going on, and you're looking for this kind of solution. Do you get at any point a diagnosis? So it wasn't until the fall of kindergarten. So at that point, he'd actually been suspended from the bus. So my kids have an hour bus ride to school, so he just couldn't sit in a bus seat still for an hour. Just couldn't do it. So he was suspended from the bus. The principal was probably calling me, every single day, telling me my son was telling me that he was a safety concern, because he would just sort of, throw his shoes in there or things like that, and they would land on people. I mean, he wasn't intentionally trying to hurt anyone. It just, he wasn't fully aware. So eventually I was able to get a referral, because you have to have a referral for a pediatrician. So eventually was able to get a referral from a medical doctor to a pediatrician. And basically he ran around her office for 5 or 10 minutes, and she just said, yep, he's got ADHD. So never really
10 minutes.
Yeah.
And just watched him behave.
Yeah,
that was it.
Basically. Okay. And really didn't watch him. She was more just disturbed that he was running around her office. Yeah. And then we had also, when he was younger, because he would sort of just sometimes not be there and you weren't sure if he could hear you or not. My brother was actually the one that pointed it out and thought maybe he should get his hearing tested. So I thought, well, I'm pretty sure he can hear, but I'll just put him on the list. So he was actually 2 years on the list with an audiologist. So they kind of just called me up. It happened to be the beginning of kindergarten as well. And we went to the audiologist, and they said that his hearing was perfectly fine, but he was definitely exhibiting autistic behaviors and pervasive developmental delay.
What does that mean?
So pervasive developmental delay. So that was kind of what they put on the paper. So I know more about kind of autism, but just he was delayed overall in everything. So he really didn't have, even fine motor skills, wasn't able to color or things like that. He could, barely write or draw. His speech was delayed. There was just a lot of delays.
Okay. And then how does Truehope and Empower Plus fit into this?
Yeah. So when I was digging into, so as soon as I kind of had these tentative sort of diagnosis, again, they told me, well, the only thing you can do is basically put him on medication. And so I knew that wasn't the answer. I knew that my son's body could heal. I just knew it in my gut, right? And so I just started researching. I was honestly staying up till probably 2 a.m. every night, just reading and researching and finding anything I could. And I started trying different supplements, and I spent a lot of money on my son's recovery, like thousands and thousands of dollars, because none of that's covered.
Of course not. No, yeah.
Yeah. And so I came across Truehope, and I don't even remember if I saw it on Facebook or where I saw it. But I just immediately called in, and I ordered it both for myself and my son. So I started him on that, and they helped us, figure out a dosage, and then they gave us some other recommendations, and I started him on omegas and things like that.
How old was he at this point?
Yeah, so this was January of 2018. So this was still in kindergarten. So he'd had that diagnosis in the fall there, and then I discovered Truehope by January.
Okay, so you got on the product.
I guess it was, I'll say actually December, and then by the time I was like, okay, let's do it, and I ordered it for January. Yeah.
So early 2018.
Yeah.
So a few years ago. Okay, great. And then so how does it go? You get Truehope comes to you somehow.
Yeah.
You go for it. You order the products, because I'm sure at this point you're willing to try anything.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because there's no answers. Yeah. Because there's no answers, especially in the conventional medical system, where there's obviously a place for pharmaceutical drugs.
Right.
There's a place for them, but as a mother, and you say you knew deep down that he could heal, and you could find an answer that wasn't sedation for the rest of his life.
Well, and just seeing that where he came from, fully functioning and developing, ahead of the curve, and then to change drastically so much in the opposite direction, I knew that, okay, if that happened, we can go back, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So how does the beginning stages of trying Empower? Is it Empower Plus that you purchased? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Great. So tell us about how that went for both
and
of
also
you.
the Inositol as well.
Okay. Great.
Yeah, which was really great.
All right.
So we started taking it, and myself as well. So we started taking it, and eventually I started to really notice, that he was more calm. He was able to have a little bit more kind of self-control. He was able to and this is through help with the school as well, just starting to differentiate better between his moods, his own moods. So knowing he would call them happy Alex, mad Alex, and sad Alex. So then he was able to kind of recognize those parts of himself, and when he would slip into one of those kind of states. So he started to, just become more aware. He actually started developing more fine motor skills. So that was really cool. His speech started to change, and with the high dosing omegas as well, with the EMP, I found was a really great pairing because they really complement each other. And he was able to actually, within, I would say, a month or two, his speech had completely returned. Yeah.
So this is wonderful. So I'm so glad that you're able to find these type of solutions.
Yeah.
I'd love to know about, so how old was he at the start of 2018? Like 4?
Yeah, so he would have been 5.
Okay, so he's 5 years old. Okay. And how did you figure out dosages?
Yeah, so I actually spoke with Truehope, with the company, and they had a customer or a naturopath or someone that actually helped me figure out the dosing at the time.
Yeah, that's our micronutrient support
Yeah,
team.
micronutrient support, yeah.
Because it's obviously very important that even with supplementation, if you're not taking the right dosages for the individual, then, you know, it's not going to be as effective. Yeah. So that's wonderful that you took that.
Yeah, so we were both on a more of a therapeutic dose, to be able to replenish our bodies, yeah.
All right, great. Well, it sounds like was the transition pretty quick? Like did you notice things, like how quickly did you notice
within a couple
changes?
of weeks, I would say.
2 weeks?
Actually,
wow.
You know what? Now that I think of it, I don't know why I hadn't thought of this one for a while, but one thing I really noticed change was he would anxiously eat. Like he would sort of just anxiously like stuff his food and overeat because of that. That changed pretty quickly. He stopped anxiously eating. He was able to just calmly eat his food. Yeah.
Well, I love what you said about that he was able to become conscious and aware of kind of like what state he's in.
Yeah.
I know a lot of adults that don't have that ability. So that's a really, really important part of being a present individual, is like knowing, being aware of like how you're feeling.
Yeah.
And you know how that's affecting yourself and the people around you. So like that's an incredible ability to happen quite a quick space in time. And then so he's able to slow down with his eating and became more aware of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely I noticed changes in his gut. He was able to, the throwing up wasn't happening as much. And that already kind of started getting better, kind of prior to that, just with the food elimination and things that I'd done, but definitely continued to improve as well with that.
That's wonderful. And then, you continue for, so what type of time frame are we in now? So you started like early 2018.
Yeah.
Like where are we now?
Yeah. So, we're kind of leading into the spring. And then that's where it was actually March 1st where I met my business partner. And then we started doing work together with Alex at that point.
That's your chiropractic partner, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I know that there's a chiro link
into
your son's therapy.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a bit about that? I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, for sure. So I should say I thank the algorithms on the internet for this one, because once I was doing all this research, they would put all these different, advertisements and podcasts and different things in my view. So that's how I saw a video called ADHD, The Perfect Storm. And it was by a group of chiropractors down in the US. And they explained the importance of chiropractic care and making sure that your brain and your body are in that full communication. That's what happens with these kids with, ADHD or autism or things like this, is that communication is not happening. So they're really not aware of where their body is in space, right? That proprioception. And so it's about restoring that communication between the brain and the body. And I watched this video and I thought, okay, this is the missing link, right? Because I felt like at that point, everything that I was doing was like a piece of the pie, right? Everything was a piece of the pie in his recovery, and he was getting there. Things were changing. But I knew that this was going to be the next step. So I actually called down to California and told them I'd get on an airplane and do whatever I had to do. Because at that point, I was like, just take all my money. I don't care. Like, I want my son back. And so they were like, no, you don't have to get on an airplane. And they actually knew Dr. Chantel because she'd done some work with them. She was part of their group there. So I gave her a call and I said, do you do these nervous system scans? I want to know what's going on with my son. She said, yep, come on in. And that was March 1st of 2018.
And where was she? Where were you and where was she practicing?
Like 15 minutes from my house.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, 15
That's
minutes.
Ridiculous. Imagine if you went to California and found that out on the way home.
Yeah, no doubt.
Wild. Okay.
And actually, side note, I had gone to a chiropractic conference, so just a couple years ago, and shared my son's story with this same group of chiropractors. And he actually joked that I somehow am resourceful enough that I called him at his house. That wasn't even his clinic.
Wow.
So that's how resourceful I had
Good
to be with figuring out my son's health. Yeah.
That's diving deep. That's great. Okay, wonderful. So you start working with the chiro work, and you obviously got the supplementation at the same time.
Yeah.
How did the chiro go?
Yeah. So I brought him in. We did a scan. So there's a thermal scan that detects interference in the nervous system. So there was definitely interference in his upper cervical, so kind of neck area. So it was kind of like kinking the garden hose, right? So the messages can't get through, right? Because the brain communicates with the body down through the spinal cord, out through the nerves, right?
And when you say interference, is this like skeletal interference?
No, so nervous system interference.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, with that communication between the brain and the body, if there's something called a subluxation, which is a misalignment in the spine, so it interferes with that communication. So then it blocks those messages getting through. And that's where, again, what's going on not only internally inside of our body. So, our liver needs some work, or our foot hurts, need to heal our foot, but also what's going on around us in our space. Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, and how was he with the actual treatments himself?
Yeah. So he had his first adjustment, and then he just like went off the wall. So it was like everything I had done was completely erased.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In one adjustment, and it was kind of over right before a long weekend. So now we had 4 days where we were at home and I did not leave the house. He was off the wall, and I thought, okay, it was obviously really scary, but I thought, okay, this did something. Like, how did this have this impact on his body? Whether it was negative or positive, It did something. Yeah. So then we came back because I was like, well, now we're in. So we came back and we started getting adjusted. So we came back the next week 3 times, and then we continued from there. And every adjustment he got, he would get a little worse that kind of same day, but then he would come right back down and get better. So he started to be able to self-regulate more and more and more. And it was pretty amazing. And the school really noticed the changes as well. Yeah.
So, and how did that go? Like, were you getting like... Were you getting like less calls?
Less calls. I mean, I would honestly melt every time my phone would ring at that point. Less calls was definitely my goal.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So chiro supplementation, and you're obviously experiencing some kind of, I mean, with any therapeutic work that's significant, it's never this like upward perfect recovery. There's obviously dips in that, and having such the practice of chiropractic work is just wonderful. I love getting chiro work.
Yeah. Simon, I'll just add to that. When you say the dips, every single thing, and I would say including EMP, every single thing that I've done with my son, he goes backwards a bit first, and then I know it's working because now I know that, right? It's scary at first, but he would go backwards and then way forwards.
So one step back. Okay.
Yeah. So when people are saying, "Oh, they're getting worse," yeah, good.
So what made you stick with it rather than like, oh my God, this isn't working? You must have had a feeling, an intuition.
Yeah, I looked at the science. That video was very in depth, looking at the science, the nervous system. It made sense to me. And just seeing that it did have that effect on him. And because anything I had done in the past, he had gone backwards as well before he'd gone forward. So I just kind of held on to that. Yeah.
Just amazing. Wow. And then there must be a point, like when was the kind of like first time where you maybe thought or knew that you had your son back?
Yeah. Oh, this is kind of emotional for me. I think it was June that year. We went to a indoor playground, and my son was playing, which normally would have been kind of a stressful event because I wouldn't know he would get in scuffles with kids and parents would be talking to me. But he was just playing on the glider with this little girl, this exact same size as him. And they were just having a conversation. And he was asking her about, what her name is and, what grade she's in, and asking her just all about herself and just having developing a friendship with her. And I'd never seen him do that. So that was huge for me.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a wonderful moment. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
You also mentioned, I remember in your notes before we decided to do this podcast about a parent-teacher conference as well.
Yeah.
Because they were probably very different before and then after.
Yeah, very much so. So in kindergarten, we had a parent-teacher interview that was his whole team, his team of people, of support people, basically, figuring out how we were going to support him going forward into his school years, right? Not really thinking, the future was looking that great. And then fast forward to grade 1, that first parent teacher interview was 5 minutes with only the teacher. And she had no concerns. And obviously, like, there was still, catch up and things he had to do, but just the ground that he'd already covered was so huge. And then I also received a letter from the school saying, that he was no longer on the list for speech therapy. Yeah.
That's just amazing. Yeah. I mean, as a parent, that just must be just the most.
Yeah. I keep that letter. Thing. I've kept everything. I keep it.
Yeah.
All.
That's wonderful. Tell us a little bit about you and EMP.
Yeah.
Because you're going through one of the most wildest possible stressful things you could ever experience, I think, as a parent.
Yeah.
Watching your son kind of, I don't know, fade away in many aspects. But then I just can't believe that from January 2018 to June.
It's pretty unbelievable.
It's 6 months. That's insane.
Yeah.
And that's obviously the power of not only the right nutrition and micronutrients, but having that chiropractic work to actually deliver those things to work and function.
Yeah.
It's just mind-blowing. And, I must have listened to a couple of hundred stories when it comes to Empower Plus.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind every single time. So why don't you tell us a little about you personally with Empower Plus?
Yeah. So kind of where my anxiety was, I mean, back when he was little, I kind of had a bubble, right? So I could kind of control my environment a little bit before he went to school, right? So then it wasn't quite as bad back then because we didn't go places. We just stayed home and I kind of had my kind of control over the environment. But then as he went to school, obviously things got worse. So I eventually, kind of back then, I eventually did go on some medication, which now I know a lot different, but it was a really great part of my journey because I really learned what it was like to go through being on one of those medications. So then it's allowed me to help other people more. But yes, I was on an SSRI medication. And at first I felt better. But then I started to get worse again, way worse. And I started to have suicidal thoughts, many, many, many times a day. And then I had started my nutrition course and I learned through one of the courses that the medication, that's one of the black box warnings, which they don't tell you about, is a suicidal thought. So this is kind of that timing with Truehope where I started taking it and I just actually reduced my medication even more than they, had recommended. But I cut it in half. Immediately those thoughts stopped. And I started supporting my body with the EMP. And then the thoughts started to creep back in, cut the medication right out, and then continued on the EMP. And then I would say my whole kind of therapeutic range was about 8 months where I no longer I kept taking it as a maintenance, but I did not need a therapeutic dose anymore. And I'd had anxiety really actually kind of my whole life. Like it wasn't a new thing to me. And so to be at the point where that wasn't an issue anymore at all was pretty huge for me because that's always been kind of just, in my life, right?
Sure, like a base layer feeling.
Yeah.
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 And how does inositol fit into that as well?
Oh, yes. Okay. So what I love about inositol is it's kind of like your quick fix in the day, I guess. So I would pair, and by recommendation of Truehope, they recommended that I pair the inositol with the phosphatidylcholine that I had purchased as well. And so when I take those together, and you can do this with the inositol by itself too, it really just gives you a mental and a physical calming feeling. So my son actually back then, he started playing hockey. And so I would give him that combination so that he could go to the dressing room and get dressed, not run around the rink. And then for me, it would be, I'd probably be taking it so that I could go do that, right? So it would kind of just give you that really kind of sense of peace, especially when you're leading up to something that, is, causes you more anxiety or things like that, or can help you sleep. And yeah.
That's great. I think you should be so incredibly proud of yourself for the wonderful things that you've done for your family, because a lot of people would have given up.
Yeah.
They would have just succumbed to conventional practices, but not fought. So you should be really, really proud of yourself. It's really, really inspiring to hear.
Thank you, Simon.
Why don't you tell us a little bit? Would you recommend Empower Plus to anybody? Any chance?
Absolutely. So when I was running my nutrition business from home, I would, order maybe 6 to 12 at a time. And that's just really grown over the years. I think we order about 60 at a time now. We have many of our patients take it. It's really a staple in our clinic. I recommend it to so many people, and it helps with so many things. And usually you start to see changes within the first couple of weeks. So I like using it because I know I can rely on it.
How do you ever use your story or your experience with Empower Plus to kind of convince people? Because some people need convincing that a supplement can be so powerful.
Yeah, my story, and now I have many patient testimonials as well. Yeah,
that's strong. That's wonderful. How can people connect with you at the clinic?
Yeah, so our clinic name, as I mentioned before, is Inner Strength Family Chiropractic and Wellness. So they can either contact myself through email or directly through the clinic. So my email is Michelle_spray, like a spray bottle, at live.ca. And the clinic is innerstrengthfamilychiro@gmail.com. So they can just shoot us an email. We also have a Facebook page, which we haven't maybe been, on as much as we should, but also I have a Facebook page as well, just Michelle Spray Holistic Nutritionist.
Wonderful. And just to finish up, how has, I don't know how, if you can sum this up in a few sentences, but like, what's been the impact of Truehope and Empower on your family?
Yeah, I mean, it's just been a huge part of all of our healing, right? And it's something that we'll always take. It's actually right on my island, so we don't even put it away in the cupboard. It just stays there.
Wonderful. And I think it's important to note that there's no one fix all for everything, because you tried a lot of different things.
I did,
and there are a lot of things that are complementing each other. So yeah, it's not like you're going to take this one thing. What I find that what I hear from a lot of people is this: Empower Plus gives people the ability to do the other things that can make them start to feel good. And that's a really strong thing, because as your son was able to start to become conscious and aware, it's almost like a veil lifts and you see the world in a very, very different way.
Yeah.
And our body is our body is designed to make us feel awesome and do these wonderful things. So
our bodies are amazing.
Yeah.
They're designed to heal.
Yeah.
Right? We just need to give it what it needs. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just kind of adding to that, people will ask me, what's the one, if you could say one thing that you did? And I said, the one thing I did was never stop and never give up. Right.
Yeah. And that's that's a really important point, because there is a very, very different energetic frequency between perseverance and knowing that you can heal and you can do something, and staying on that path of, let's call that positivity.
Yeah. And
then you've got another completely different set of energetic frequencies of anger and frustration and grief and hate and rage. These things carry with them a very, very different energy. And yeah, if you're able to kind of stay in that positive mode, good things will certainly come to you. I'm completely convinced of that.
Yes.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Michelle. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Simon. This was fantastic.
Yeah, I'm really excited to get this out there, and it's such a beautiful story. And yeah, I really appreciate you sharing everything with us. Yeah. For more information on anything that we've spoken about in this episode, you can see the show notes. If you want to get connected with Michelle, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. This is Truehope Cast, the official podcast of Truehope Canada. We'll see you next week.